Hi, welcome. Last week I learned that I have a collection of knives, and I realized that through a conversation that was related to my son. The conversation briefly went something like this: he's just like you, he has a collection of knives. I have a collection of knives. How many have you got? 2? 3? Okay, fair point, and that leads us to this video. I thought it's a good idea to share some of my knowledge and experience regarding the knives that are used to get things, to cut things, and not disregarding the kitchen knives that are used only for preparing food, and also disregarding the workshop knives that are primarily for workshop, like this box opener. So those deserve a separate topic, a separate video, even including scalpels and other specialty knives. So talking about general knives, and I'll touch upon multi-tools because that's what I've worked with and that's what I have. I'm old, so I do have stories that I will include here, go down the memory lane a bit. Some may be interesting and maybe even educational and helpful. So let's start. This is when I was a kindergarten kid. I used to go after the kindergarten before my parents finished work to my grandparents' flat building. They had a nice backyard with a big tree that I was not discouraged from climbing, and I enjoyed that a lot. On the first floor lived the founder of the Novi Sad, my city, neuropsychiatry. So a very interesting man that was liked to talk to me and sit on his balcony in a rocking chair with a pipe. He had a collection of pipes, and the energy that he gave when you talk to him was like Gandalf without the beard. So for the Lord of the Rings fans. And I had a small toy like keychain that had a small working revolver that you could cock and even fire without, of course, real bullets or anything, like a small replica. And he offered me a offered me this. And I thought it was a very fair trade. He thought so too, or was being generous, so I'm not sure. But I got this small little thing. It says Volvo. I don't know if it was some promotion from the company or anything, but it had a small knife, and it had a small file here that also had a bottle opener that I never used. Kids drinks in my youth did not have that kind of closing, and I didn't start drinking beer until I was 6 years old, joking. And so I got this in my early youth, and it served me very well. But of course, you always need to cut something, and this is very practical. It had a very fine leather pouch that got so worn. It was some very soft, very thin leather, but after about many years of everyday hauling it everywhere, I could no longer even sew it back together. It was too damaged, so it was left without it, but it's still working. And it's a thing that I still remember very fondly whenever I see it. In practical terms, it's fairly limited use because the blade is simply too small for most things, but it is so compact that it can fit practically anywhere. And that's why it's pretty cool. And I would not, underestimate it. Very soon after that, in my early elementary school, I got this from my grandfather, and many years later I got this pouch from my stepfather. So those were two separate things, but this lived for decades like this. This is a Swiss Army knife. Hopefully the camera can zoom it in. So this thing has some very neat tools, and it is still indispensable for camping. This corkscrew opener for wine bottles is working very well, and people that are in my company, or whose company I'm in with when I'm camping, a big percentage of those like to drink wine, and that's been my experience over the past decades. So it's a very useful thing to have when you're camping or sailing, to have a way to open wine bottles without too much hassle. So that's a big plus for this tool. It does have another cool feature. The knife itself is okay. You can sharpen it, and this size of knife is already pretty useful. So a bit larger than this. So this one is, let's take a, so this one is, I hope you can see it, about 6 centimeters tall, long, so just over 2 inches for those who live on the wrong side of the big pond. So it's quite useful. The tool also has a smaller screwdriver, flat screwdriver, and a very good and very important thing for me, and this is the scissors. For everyday use, these come in surprisingly handy when you need to finally cut something and using a knife is not really accurate enough. The other tools, including the smaller knife, are less useful, less often used, though it is cool to have a plastic, this pointy thing that's officially a toothpick, but you can use it for prying things that you don't want to scratch or similar. So it's a decent tool that's a bit outdated for mechanical work because it does not have any screwdrivers or crosshead screwdrivers, and the square head screwdrivers, hex screwdrivers or bits and things like that. But for camping and for things like that, it's pretty good. And its main downside for camping is that this is very difficult to clean. That's for me the biggest hassle. Maybe I should just relax more, but I don't like having it all dirty and sticky. So that's the only thing that's bothered me over the years, and why I use it for most other things except for cutting the knife on this thing. So we have that. Let's open the biggest knife to leave it open for comparison. A few years later, I got my first real multi-tool. I got this from my father, and this is made by the SOG company, and the biggest star of this multi-tool is these pliers that are pretty strong and have a decent cutter for wires. And so this tool is used primarily for that. The file was apparently too brittle, and my father managed to break this using it, and he was an experienced handyman, so it was probably a misfortune. It happens. And the blade on this thing is for me nothing to write home about compared to this tool. It is a bit longer officially, maybe by a few millimeters, 65 millimeters roughly. It has these serrations, and for me that's less practical to sharpen, and I really didn't get much use from this tool's knife. But let's get this out of the way. It did have an advantage of having a cross head screwdriver. That's a more practical, more useful thing, and it also has this square screwdriver that's in the United States more often used. As far as I know, in Europe very few bolts have this. So this was my move towards more mechanics related multi-tools, and I really didn't like the fact that I could not reliably put a lot of force into this without it risking to come a bit out. This goes especially for the blade. It was big enough to maybe try using some force, but it was not somehow feeling very reliable. And the pliers were quite good, so I think this is made in the United States. Yes, so that was a bit of a hit and miss. And a few years after that, when I was already, I think I finished, I finished the high school or the secondary school, and the police in my country got these Swiss Army knives, and I found this on the road. I saw it and I wanted to get something like this. It was too expensive for me, but I found it on the road. The biggest star of this thing, which I learned to like a lot with folding knives and multi-tools, was that it has a lock that you need to engage in order to close it. So you can see inside of it, hopefully. I think the proper English term for this is the liner lock. So this is how it's disengaged, and when it's engaged, the blade will not close on you. This blade was, and the tool itself was pretty badly damaged, but I managed to twist it and sharpen it in shape and glue it together. And it also had a screwdriver, but this thing didn't lock. And it had a few other tools like the bottle opener and this little can opener that was still useful at the time when I got it. Those things are now no longer needed, but these two both have the can opener thing. So here is on this one. That's a nice thing to have also for camping, just in case, though you can improvise. So this is the next tool that I got, and when I saw what I saw with it were, as its downsides were the fact that the other tools did not lock and that the choice of tools was limited. But I liked that I could have a bigger blade and more reliable, and I still didn't like the cleaning part. So that's the next tool. I hope you can see all these in the camera shot. And a few years later, that was in late 2010, this thing was sold on the local motorcycling forum by one of the members at a price of around, I think it was less than $100 when translated in the local currency and whatnot. So the thing that I googled and liked about this is made by a company called Leatherman. The model is Charge. This is the titanium model that is now branded as TTi or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. But this has been with me for now about over 15 years. And when I got this, I really liked it a lot. It has these all the bits that have a safe locking thing, so you need to disengage them or they will remain locked. So that was very practical, and it has the bits that have two sides each, and you also have a bit holder. I got this with two sets of bits, and these are still those original that you can just take out and use. And so I am the kind of person that from my childhood days, friends and family have always relied on to fix stuff. The terms like Super Mario or multi-tool, Mr. Fix-It, whatnot, the local equivalents are all got thrown around, mostly in a good joke or in a good manner, but not always. And so it is usually that wherever I go, it's expected that I will get things fixed in case of malfunctions and problems, and I often get called by friends, relatives, neighbors, whatnot to fix stuff. So I really started carrying this all the time since the day I got it. It replaced this as a thing that's with me every day. This was a bit too bulky to carry every day. It was more like it got somewhere that these two did not get much use. They were somehow in between, not good enough for anything. These were and still are my favorites. So this is for the away from civilization and mechanical things, and this is for the everyday in my city. And I take this everywhere, even cafes and discos, and it's nice, especially now that I'm older. People no longer give me suspicious looks and problems when I carry tools. So I'll get to that later also. So this is the knife also has that locking mechanism that you need to disengage before you close it, and when you open it, it closes. It works very well. So it has that, and it has also a very small, very fine bit holder. Here it is. This is, I'm not sure if you can see, this is a very small cross-tipped, like a JIS 00 or something, and this is a very small flat screwdriver. So that is another option that it has with its place in the pouch here for those very small bits. So also locks, and it has a separate sturdy flat screwdriver. It has a can opener that I think that's a good idea to have. It takes very little space and you never know. The thing that I don't like about this is that it has these very thin pliers at the tip, as opposed to this tool. This has a very thick profile pliers that are a lot stronger and have this flat thing that's longer. Here they try to incorporate too many tools, like some wire stripper that I almost never use. This is completely useless for me, so I wish this were completely flat and then just had this, and then maybe a small like this wire cutter. But still, despite that, or thanks to that, I always managed to get it to work, if not the most efficiently. And these kinds of multi-tools, in terms of tools, and even in terms of knife, which is also a tool, they are not very good for anything, but they can be useful and help you do anything as opposed to having no tools. So it's always better to have specialized tools like normal size screwdrivers and everything. But if I'm going somewhere with a bicycle or a motorcycle, I cannot carry too many tools, and especially if I'm not sure what kind of work I will be facing, then this often gets me to get things working. So it's a great thing to have, and having pliers on yourself for mechanic things, so not for forests, if you need to work with wood and food and things like that. For that, I never had any need for that, but for things where you work with machines or when you're in urban areas, pliers are super handy. They help you improvise, even as an improvised wrench or spanner. So they are a very good tool, and I like having a multi-tool with those. And so for me, I tried going without this on more than one occasion, because as you can see, it's pretty bulky. So it's like 10 centimeters in size, so a bit like 4 inches, something like that. But and it's not super light, but still I could not manage to go without it. I always end up lacking a tool, and so the way I live and the way I do things, this is with me every day, and this is for the forest a better choice in general. Now, for the blade, this blade is about just over 7 centimeters. So how much is that? 3 inches, maybe a bit less. A bit less than 3 inches. So not bad. And the thing about this blade, it says S30V. I have an article on my website. If I don't forget, I'll put a link to it in this video's description, that discusses knife steels. I also have articles regarding steels and aluminum and other metal and carbon materials in terms of bicycle frames. But this article is article I republished from now deceased author to preserve it and for my own information and to share it regarding knife steel, so you can read a bit more details, and it's not the whole story. Material is only one thing, but this thing is a bit more time consuming and concentration and effort to sharpen, but it stays sharp for a very long time. So it's very, very good. I don't have to worry about sharpening it all the time, but also I have the same problem that I mentioned about all these other multi-tools or Swiss Army knife and anything, that I cannot easily keep this clean. And it's not very practical to sharpen when you have everything like this in your hand. So I tend to not use these blades very often. I used this yesterday, this very blade by a friend, to fix something on their bicycle saddle, no less. But apart from that, when I'm expecting to be using a knife, I try to get something else. And before I get to this, let's finish the knives and then we'll talk in general. So that leads us to this. These are the same knives, practically different manufacturers. This one is practically brand new. I don't know if I carried it once for camping, and this one is well over a decade old. Maybe 15 years is something maybe a bit less than 15 years. So what this is I think this is the most famous worldwide brand for these kinds of knives. Mora Kniv, I think it's a Swedish manufacturer, and this is Bahco. The same everything, just slight differences in branding. So rubber handle, all these are stainless steel, and so is this. This is some Swedish brand stainless steel, the Sandvik, whatever they call it. The advantage of this knife is that it has this thing that's easy to wash and clean. And this is easy to wash and clean because it's simple. It's just a knife, like a kitchen knife. Even didn't have this, I drilled this by myself. And so it's as simple as it gets. It's relatively easy to sharpen, and it's like these other stainless. So if we use a lot of, in Serbia, when we make food, a lot of onion, garlic too. We have the same name for those two, just one is called the black vegetable, the other the white vegetable, but the same common name for those two. And in English it's completely different names, garlic and onion. So we use both of those, and we many people like to use a lot of vinegar and the lemons. So those are all things that especially when you're not somewhere with a lot of water at hand easily available, it's easier to not have to worry about keeping your blade clean and oiled. So stainless steel is for me pretty practical, and this one gets sharpened pretty easily. And so this one has been with me for a very long time. It has some sort of click mechanism when you put it in this holder, so it stays in place, but I put this small thing just in my backpack to prevent it from opening and dropping out and cutting something. Never use this on a belt, not very practical for me. So that's a simple knife, and this one is the same thing, only newer. So the blade length is here a bit longer, about 10 centimeters. Yes, 10 centimeters. And for me, that's the minimum size that is practical for cutting food, and not very good for big bread parts, but you can get it to work, and it's simple to clean, and It's very good. This stays in my workshop now. I made the blade with a bit different shape, different profile to be more sturdy when I abuse it. And I'll add this to easily cut food. That's mostly what I use it for. Some people like to use knives for preparing wood for fire and things like that, and at least that's what I see on the internet. But in Serbia, people I go camping with, and when I go camping, usually carry a small hatchet. And relatively recently, over the past few decades, some small folding like saws are available, and that's very practical for me. And I don't like those bigger, bulkier knives that are trying to make a sort of a replacement for a small axe, for a small hatchet, is what you call it in English. So that's for me not been very practical. And so if I had to recommend a knife to my 10-year-old or 15-year-old self, I would say that something like this is very good for camping, and this costs about, I don't know, prices have been very crazy last few years, since that funny named virus came out. Things started going crazier, at least that's my impression. But this was very cheap when I was buying it, for about maybe $10 or something like that, maybe half that price for this one. It was almost to get it as a gift. You buy a pen and you get this, and when you're buying some other tools by this manufacturer, I got it from their representative at a really good price. So that was very cheap, and they work very well and last very well, and easy to keep sharp, easy to sharpen. I don't need to sharpen them when I go camping. They stay sharp long enough for the week or two that I spend when I'm to prepare food and things like that. So they're pretty good for that, and it's better than any of those that have folding blades and things for keeping it easily clean. For things that I carry every day, as I already mentioned, something like this, especially this model, Leatherman, has many other models, but this one is, based on what I could see, and I googled a lot of other alternatives, and so this one seems like the best thing for general mechanics, fixing computers, bicycles, and other stuff that you come across. And this, like Swiss Army knife, especially with the bottle opener, looks like a great option for camping. It's you can forget about the blade, rely on something like this, and carry it just for those other tools if you need to. But to be really practical for camping, only one knife is enough. This is a nice extra, but I wouldn't go out and spend money to get this unless I really got into situations where I'm thinking, oh, I'm really in a problem and something like this helps me fix it, someone has it, and then use it. That's general advice for me when I'm getting tools and anything. That is to see when you need something and then buy it. Don't buy it before you need it, don't buy it because you think you'll need it, but when you need something once, borrow it. When you need something 2 times, borrow it, but make a note. And when you need it for a 3rd time, you will probably be needing it many more times in the future, so then consider buying yourself something that you figured out from borrowing which works well for you. So something like that. And I also just want to now briefly touch upon the tool thing. Why I never considered my collection of knives to be a collection of knives or even a collection for that matter. Those are just tools that I picked up over the years that have served, and many of them still are serving a purpose. They get things done. And the discussion that started the idea for this video was that I there was a knife in the school of my son, and that was of course now a lot of excitement from teachers and parents and whatnot. And so I try to do the best thing that I can, that is the first using my own example, but also talking, and hopefully without being too boring. So my part of talking was trying to emphasize that knives are tools, and if you carry a knife to make someone be afraid, not even to mention to hurt someone, that's very bad. It's abuse of tools, and it's something that I would consider a weakness. And there are knives that are designed for combat, if you like, and they have their place, but I think that's something that makes sense for the military mostly, and for the other things it's I've been living in interesting times and for a long time, and I've never had the need to use anything better than these things, and see little point in those other kinds of knives. I think there are better choices in life than to get yourself into situations when you are using or planning to use something like that for things that are not food preparation especially. So that's the whole video. I hope you found this interesting. If you have any questions or additions or corrections, please use the BikeGremlin.net forum. Comments on my YouTube are generally locked for reasons I've already explained in separate video and some articles even, so won't be bothering you with that. But it's not trying to win any popularity contests or get millions of sponsors, viewers and followers, whatnot. Just trying to share what works, and that's it. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in some other video. Stay cool. Cheers.